I didn't cry when my husband died. People expect you to collapse, to shatter, to become someone fragile and hollow overnight. But grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like silence, the kind that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. It had been 1 week since I buried the man I loved for 52 years. 1 week since I stopped hearing his slippers shuffle across the kitchen tile every morning. 1 week since the right side of our bed became permanently cold. 1 week since the house I bought with my savings, stopped feeling like home. At 72 years old, I suddenly felt misplaced. My son Ethan insisted I move in with him and his wife, Vanessa. "You shouldn't be alone, Mom," he said, holding my hands across the funeral reception table. His eyes were red, his voice gentle. The same boy I raised, the same boy I stayed up nights with when he had fevers, nightmares, broken hearts. "We'll take care of you." I believed him. Because that's what mothers do. They believe. The first few days at their house were comforting enough. Vanessa hugged me when I arrived, helped me unpack, told me not to lift anything heavy. She even made tea and asked about old family stories while Ethan sat nearby, smiling like he was proud of us getting along. I thought, I'm lucky. Not everyone gets kindness after loss. Ethan checked on me constantly. "Did you sleep okay? Need anything from the store? Want to watch something together?" He was attentive, loving. The son I knew. And Vanessa? Well, Vanessa was respectful when Ethan was around. Always. "Let me get that for you. Don't worry about dishes. Your family." But something changed when Ethan left for work. At first it was subtle. A shift in tone. A missing smile. Silence that wasn't comfortable, just cold. She stopped making conversation. Then she stopped acknowledging me entirely. If I spoke, she answered with one-word responses. If I entered a room, she left it. I told myself I was imagining things. Grief makes you sensitive, emotional. Maybe I was reading too much into ordinary behavior. That's what I repeated in my head. Until the small things became impossible to ignore. One morning I washed my own breakfast plate. Vanessa walked in, glanced at the sink and sighed loudly. "You know," she said, not even looking at me, "some people rinse dishes properly." I blinked. I thought I did. She took the plate, re-washed it dramatically, and muttered, "I just prefer things done right." I stood there, 72 years old, feeling like a scolded child. I didn't mention it to Ethan. Why would I create tension in his marriage over something so small? So I swallowed it, like mothers do. Then came the comments. Little needles disguised as casual conversation. "You've accumulated a lot of stuff over the years. This house wasn't designed for 3 adults. Privacy is important for couples." Always when Ethan wasn't home. Always just soft enough to deny. And when he returned, Vanessa transformed. Warm voice, gentle smile, touching my shoulder affectionately. "How was your day? Your mother and I watched a show together." She told me the sweetest story. I almost questioned my own memory. Was I misjudging her? Was grief making me paranoid? I stayed quiet. I stayed polite. I stayed invisible. Because I truly believed time would smooth things out. That patience would restore harmony. I had endured worse in life. Much worse. This was temporary. That's what I thought. Until the afternoon everything changed. Ethan had left early for work. The house was quiet. I was folding laundry at the dining table, trying to contribute, trying not to feel like a burden, when Vanessa walked in. She didn't greet me. Didn't smile. She simply stood there, arms crossed. Watching. There was something different in her expression that day. No pretense. No politeness. Just open irritation. Finally she spoke. "We need to talk." I set the towel down slowly. "Of course." She pointed toward the back of the house. Toward the garage. Her voice was calm. Casual. Like she was suggesting a furniture rearrangement. "That's for you." I frowned. "I'm sorry." She gestured again. "You deserve to live there. Real guests live in this home." For a moment I genuinely thought I misheard her. The words didn't fit into reality. I laughed softly, confused. "You're joking." She didn't laugh back. Her eyes stayed cold. "I'm not." Silence flooded the room. I searched her face for kindness, for hesitation, for humanity. There was none. I lost my husband last week, I said quietly. And this is our house, she replied. You've overstayed your welcome. Something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. Heavier. The sound of illusion breaking. I looked around the living room. The furniture I helped choose. The down payment I contributed when Ethan couldn't afford it. The walls that held decades of my sacrifices. Then I looked back at Vanessa. I didn't argue. Didn't beg. Didn't defend myself. I simply nodded. Because in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't about the garage. This was about seeing exactly where I stood in the life I helped build. And that clarity was the beginning of everything that came next. That night, I didn't mention what Vanessa had said. Not immediately. I told myself it was better to wait. Better to choose the right moment. Ethan had just walked through the door tired from work, loosening his tie, greeting me with the familiar kiss on the cheek he'd given me since he was a teenager. How was your day, Mom? I almost answered honestly. Instead I said, quiet, because I wasn't ready to watch the balance of his life tilt because of me. Dinner passed normally. Vanessa laughed at his jokes, asked about his meetings, reached for his hand across the table like a loving partner in a commercial for perfect marriages. If I hadn't been there earlier, I would have believed it too. That was the unsettling part. How convincing she was. How easy it was to rewrite reality when the audience changed. But silence has weight. And mine grew heavier by the hour. Later that evening, when Vanessa went upstairs, I finally spoke. Ethan, I said gently, can we talk for a moment? He muted the television immediately. Of course. I chose my words carefully. This afternoon. Vanessa suggested I move into the garage. His expression didn't shift the way I expected. There was no shock. No confusion. No immediate defense of me. Instead, he exhaled slowly and leaned back. Mom. That one word told me everything. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. She didn't mean it harshly, he continued. We've just been discussing space lately. Adjustments. You know, practical things. Practical. I stared at him. She said real guests live in the home. He rubbed his temples. You might be taking it too personally. The sentence landed like a quiet slap. Too personally. I realized then this conversation had already happened, just not with me in the room. Vanessa had gone first, framed it, prepared it, and now I was responding to a narrative already built. I'm not asking for luxury, I said calmly. I lost my husband a week ago. I know, Ethan replied softer now. And I love you. But Vanessa. He stopped himself. Vanessa feels the house dynamics are changing. We need structure. Structure. I folded my hands together so he wouldn't see them tremble. This is temporary, he added. Just until things settle. Temporary. It's fascinating how often that word is used to soften permanent decisions. I nodded. Because arguing wouldn't bring back the son who once saw the world through my eyes. Of course, I said quietly. Relief crossed his face. Relief. Not concern. Not protectiveness. Relief that conflict had been avoided. That was the moment something inside me shifted again, deeper this time. Not heartbreak. Clarity. The following days confirmed everything. The garage wasn't cleaned. Wasn't prepared. Wasn't discussed again. Because it was never about logistics. It was about boundaries. Positioning. Making sure I understood my place. Vanessa became colder. More direct. Drawers I used were suddenly needed for household organization. My belongings were stacked neatly in boxes. My routines were treated like inconveniences. Ethan remained kind, but distant. And distance, I learned, can wound more quietly than cruelty. One afternoon I overheard them. They didn't know I was in the hallway. We can't keep living like this, Vanessa whispered. She's my mother. And we're your life. Silence. Then, she'll figure something out. That was it. No malice. No shouting. Just a conclusion. I returned to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. 52 years of marriage had taught me many things. But motherhood had taught me the hardest truth. Love given doesn't guarantee love returned in the form you expect. Sometimes it returns altered. Sometimes smaller. Sometimes not at all. That evening I packed a single suitcase. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Methodically. Documents. Medication. A few photographs. My husband's watch. I paused only once, looking at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't see someone abandoned. I saw someone awake. Vanessa noticed first. Going somewhere? Her tone was neutral. Curious. I zipped the suitcase. Yes. She didn't ask where. Didn't offer to help. Just nodded faintly, as though a problem was solving itself. Ethan came home minutes later. His smile faded when he saw the bag. Mom, I think it's best I give you both the space you need. Guilt flickered across his face. You don't have to. But he didn't finish. Because part of him wanted this resolved. I'll be fine, I assured him. We hugged. It wasn't cold. It wasn't cruel. But it wasn't the embrace of a son protecting his mother either. It was polite. I picked up my suitcase. Walked to the door. Paused. Looked back at the house. The house I bought. The house I helped secure when Ethan's credit history wasn't strong enough. The house whose down payment came from my retirement savings. Then I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and walked away. They thought I was leaving out of sadness, out of weakness, out of nowhere else to go. They didn't know. I was leaving because I finally remembered something important. Ownership isn't just emotional. Sometimes, it's legal. And I hadn't forgotten that. The night air felt colder than I expected when I stepped off their porch. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just real. Cold pavement under my shoes. A single suitcase in my hand. And a silence that followed me all the way to the curb. I didn't call a friend. Didn't panic. Didn't cry. Because I already knew exactly where I was going. Grief may cloud the heart, but experience sharpens the mind. And at 72 I had plenty of that. I drove to a modest extended stay hotel across town. Nothing fancy. Clean. Quiet. Anonymous. The kind of place where no one asks questions and no one pretends to understand your life. The receptionist smiled politely. Checking in. Yes. She handed me the key card. And just like that I had a door that opened for me again. That first night alone, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to breathe. Not mourn my husband. Not resent my son. Just breathe. Because something important had happened. I had stopped shrinking. I had spent years prioritizing peace, compromise, support, sacrifice. Those qualities build families, but they also build expectations. Expectations that mothers will always bend, always give, always stay. But I had left. And leaving creates space. Space to think. Space to remember. Space to act. The next morning I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my financial advisor. The second was to my attorney. The third was to myself, metaphorically speaking, reminding the woman in the mirror that kindness does not require self-erasure. By noon, I was seated in a quiet office reviewing paperwork I hadn't looked at in years. Ownership records, mortgage documents, transfer agreements, all properly filed, all legally binding, all very clear. The house Ethan and Vanessa lived in was not theirs. It never had been. I purchased it when Ethan struggled to qualify for a loan after starting his business. I structured everything carefully, protecting the asset while allowing him stability. My name remained on the deed. Mine alone. Taxes paid by me. Insurance under my policy. No ambiguity. No loopholes. No misunderstanding. Just facts. My attorney looked over his glasses. What would you like to do? It wasn't asked with judgment. Only professionalism. I folded my hands. I'd like to reclaim my home. He nodded once. That's entirely within your rights. I didn't rush. Justice isn't theatrical in real life. It's procedural, measured, documented. Over the next week, formal notices were prepared, filed, delivered through proper legal channels. Not emotional messages. Not angry confrontations. Certified documentation. The kind that arrives in sealed envelopes. The kind that cannot be dismissed or rewritten through conversation. I imagined the moment they opened it. Vanessa first, most likely. Reading carefully. Blinking. Reading again. Ethan looking over her shoulder. Confusion turning into realization. Realization turning into disbelief. Because power shifts are rarely loud. They're quiet and undeniable. 3 days later, Ethan called. His voice was strained. Mom, I received something in the mail. I expected you would. A pause. You're terminating occupancy? I'm reclaiming my residence. Another pause, longer this time. You didn't talk to me first. I let the silence sit between us. I tried to live there first. He exhaled. This is extreme. No, I replied gently. Being asked to move into a garage was extreme. That landed. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. Didn't insult Vanessa. Because this wasn't revenge fueled by anger. This was correction guided by truth. I never wanted conflict, I continued. But I will not surrender dignity for harmony. He sounded smaller now. You're making us leave? I'm asking you to respect what legally belongs to me. Another long silence. Finally, I didn't realize you felt this hurt. And there it was. Not apology. Awareness. Late. But real. Now you do. When the call ended, I didn't celebrate. Didn't feel triumphant. Justice isn't fireworks. It's steadiness returning to your spine. It's sleeping without replaying humiliation. It's remembering your worth without needing validation. 2 weeks later, I stood outside the house again. My house. The moving truck was parked nearby. Boxes stacked along the walkway. Vanessa directing placement with tight frustration written across her posture. Ethan avoided eye contact. I didn't gloat. Didn't lecture. I simply waited. Because sometimes the most powerful position is presence. Eventually he approached me. You could have handled this differently. I studied his face, searching for the boy I raised. I did, I said softly. I handled it with patience until patience became permission. He didn't respond. There was nothing left to argue. The paperwork had already spoken. And as I walked toward the front door, keys in hand, I felt something I hadn't felt since my husband passed. Not happiness. Not victory. Something quieter. Balance returning. But the story wasn't finished yet. Because reclaiming a house isn't the same thing as rebuilding a life inside it. And what I chose to do next was something neither Ethan nor Vanessa expected. The house smelled exactly the same when I stepped inside. Lavender polish on the wood floors. Faint traces of the cinnamon candles I used every winter. The quiet hum of familiarity embedded in the walls. But something else lingered too. Distance. Not physical distance, emotional distance. The kind that grows when a place holds memories that haven't yet decided whether they're comforting or painful. I set my suitcase down in the entryway and walked through each room slowly. Not inspecting. Remembering. The kitchen where I taught Ethan how to bake cookies on a chair pulled up to the counter. The living room where my husband and I watched decades of Sunday football games we barely understood. The hallway where family photos marked time more honestly than calendars ever could. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grounded. Because reclaiming the house was never the goal. Reclaiming myself was. Over the next few weeks, I didn't rush back into routine. I made changes. Real ones. I donated furniture that carried emotional weight I no longer needed. Repainted walls lighter. Brighter. Converted the spare bedroom into a reading space instead of a guest room defined by obligation. For the first time in years, I shaped my environment around my future, not my past. Friends visited. Neighbors stopped by. I joined a community walking group that met every morning at the park. People my age. People rebuilding. People living, not waiting. It reminded me of something important. Life doesn't shrink with age. It clarifies. Ethan called occasionally. Conversations were polite. Careful. He apologized once, awkwardly. Not in a dramatic speech, but in a quiet sentence that sounded practiced and sincere. I should have handled things better. I accepted. Because forgiveness isn't surrender. It's release. But I didn't restore things to how they were. Boundaries remained. Visits happened on my terms. Respect was no longer assumed, it was required. And surprisingly, our relationship became healthier than it had been in years. Not closer. Stronger. Because it was honest. I never spoke harshly about Vanessa. Not to Ethan. Not to friends. Not even to myself. Bitterness ages you faster than time ever could. Instead, I understood something simple. People reveal who they are when they believe power belongs to them. And life reveals reality when power shifts. That was enough. One evening, about 2 months after moving back in, I sat on the porch watching the sunset stretch across the yard my husband once cared for so lovingly. His empty chair beside me no longer felt unbearable. It felt sacred. I held his watch in my palm, the one I packed the night I left, and thought about everything that had happened. Loss, displacement, betrayal, clarity, action, renewal. And I realized something I wish someone had told me decades earlier. Being needed is not the same as being valued. For years, I believed motherhood required endless accommodation, endless patience, endless sacrifice. But dignity requires boundaries. And boundaries teach others how to love you properly. Even your own children. Especially your own children. Sometimes people ask if I regret walking out that night. I don't. Because that walk wasn't abandonment. It was transformation. I left behind the version of myself that accepted invisibility in exchange for peace. And I returned as someone who understood her worth didn't expire with age, grief, or loneliness. The house didn't change my life. Leaving it did. Coming back completed the lesson. If Ethan and Vanessa learned anything from it, I hope it was this. Kindness toward parents isn't repayment. It isn't obligation. It isn't charity. It's character. And character defines the homes we build. Far more than walls ever could. Now when I wake in the morning, the house is quiet again. But it's not empty. It's mine. Filled with light through freshly painted windows. Filled with laughter from friends who visit freely. Filled with peace earned through difficult choices. I make tea, sit by the window, and breathe. Not as someone who survived betrayal. Not as someone who won. But as someone who remembered exactly who she was. And never forgot again. No one is ever too old to reclaim their dignity. If you believe respect should never be optional, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Your voice matters here.